Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. The Supreme Court of Canada will not hear an appeal in the case of an Alberta couple whose toddler died. Plus, a plasma blood drive being held for the woman stabbed during a hostage situation in Lethbridge. And only 3 candidates square off in the final debate for the CPC leadership.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. A 34-year-old Lethbridge woman is dead following a head-on collision on Highway 5 just outside of Raymond, Alberta. At approximately 9:35 a.m., Raymond RCMP responded to the collision where a small SUV collided head-on with a semi-truck, which was carrying livestock. The female driver of the SUV was declared deceased at the scene, and the semi-driver suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The Supreme Court of Canada will not hear an application in a high-profile Alberta case that saw a couple tried twice in the death of their sick toddler. David and Colette Steffen were accused of not seeking medical attention sooner for their 18-month-old son before he died in 2012. They testified that they were treating the boy with natural remedies for what they thought was croup. BCN's Naveen Desh joins me now. Naveen, we all thought the case for the Steffens was already finished. So what was this application to the Supreme Court all about?
Well, Jeanette, the Steffens applied to the Supreme Court to have laws changed to protect parents' choice of care and choice of vaccination for their children. The couple were originally charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life following the death of their son Ezekiel, who died of meningitis. According to David Steffen, the couple did not want to see something similar to that happen to another family. Steffen believes that the application was denied by the court because it was not a criminal proceeding and not a high priority to pursue. This case, however, is not linked with the original one that made worldwide headlines. A third trial for that case did not happen after the Crown stayed the charges in 2021 amid criminal charges for credential fraud in the U.S. against a key witness, former Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Bamadil Adiegbo. Jeanette?
Thanks so much, Nav. The friend of a Lethbridge woman who was held hostage at a downtown business last month is recalling the day she learned the news of the attack. To give back and to honor her friend in a special way, Alana Wheeler is hosting a blood and plasma drive, hoping to spark donations to a cause they are so passionate about. BCN's Angela Stewart has more.
It was absolutely shocking, and, we just pooled together.
July 14th was almost like any other day for Alana Wheeler.
So I was at home and my husband came home, and he is a big news watcher. And he said, "Did you hear about the attack that happened downtown?" And I told him no.
Hearing the news that a hostage situation took place at the same office where her friend of 10 years, Catherine Linder, works at.
I knew that it was a smaller office, so if she wasn't directly involved, she would have known what was going on and would have witnessed it.
Calls were quickly made to Catherine's phone, but no answer. A short time later, Wheeler says it was Catherine's family who confirmed the news with her, that it was her friend who was the victim of that brutal attack on that Thursday afternoon.
At that point in time, we didn't know the extent of the injuries. We didn't know if, she was, dead, alive. It was absolutely shocking. And, we just pooled together, praying for her recovery and hoping that she would be okay, and then, wanting to do something for her and for her family.
Donating to a cause that is near and dear to Catherine's heart, Wheeler says she knew she wanted to give back to her friend on a much bigger scale.
So I thought, what better way to honor her and to, bring awareness to donating plasma than to have a blood drive.
Titled 50 Shades of Red, the blood drive in honor of Catherine will be taking place from August 9th to the 11th. Wheeler says it feels great to give back, but to also bring awareness to donate.
You always want to bring awareness too, but knowing the story behind why you're doing it, it always puts a person behind the cause. You never know what, this world holds for us. So if we're able to donate plasma and knowing that it could save a life and to save somebody that is near and dear to us, it just makes it so much more worthwhile.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
A word of warning that this next story contains graphic images that may upset some viewers. Earlier this week, a Red Deer family's life changed forever. Shay Fuser received a call from her friend Alicia that her son Kaysen had been viciously mauled by a cougar near Rocky Mountain House area. 7-year-old Kaysen received over 200 staples and surgical clamps and was in surgery for 3.5 hours. He also received additional stitches to his head, face, and neck. Miraculously, no main arteries were hit or lungs punctured. Kaysen does, however, have a fractured jaw. Alberta Fish and Wildlife confirmed that the cougar was caught and euthanized. Video journalist Micah Quinn was out in the river valley in Lethbridge today and has tips on what you should do should you encounter a cougar.
Thanks, Jeanette. Alberta Fish and Wildlife says if you do encounter a cougar, it's best to let them know and contact your local Fish and Wildlife office. If you do encounter a cougar in the distance, make sure you don't run or turn your back. If the cougar appears to be unaware that you're there, grab your children and pets and bring them close to you and slowly back away and leave the area. If you see a cougar in your backyard, make sure that all people and pets are brought inside and give the cougar enough space to leave the yard. Make sure to notify your neighbors as well and contact Alberta Fish and Wildlife. If the cougar is close and showing aggressive behavior like hissing, snarling, or staring intently, do not run or play dead. Show the cougar that you're not easy prey by making yourself big and speaking loudly. If the cougar makes contact, fight back using any means at your disposal. Hit the cougar in the face with rocks, sticks, or your own fists. You can also use bear spray, as it's been known to be effective against cougars as well. Back to you, Jeanette.
Thank you, Micah. An Alberta Health Services report shows a big spike in the number of times ambulances have not been available to respond to emergency calls in Calgary. The report shows the number of red alerts in the city for the month of April was 10 times higher than 3 years before. The province says it's been dealing with an increase in emergency calls due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, opioids, and other concerns, and notes that 4 new ambulances are serving Calgary, including new staff. Opposition NDP leader Rachel Notley says the United Conservative government needs to hire more full-time paramedics. Well, if you're a patient in Edmonton, you're likely to be forced into the hallway instead of a hospital room. This according to a startling report by Alberta Health Services. NDP Deputy Leader Sarah Hoffman responded today to the growing concern about the state of healthcare in Alberta and called on the UCP to immediately address the crisis she says they've created.
The AMA's head of emergency medicine, Dr. Paul Parks, described today's situation as, quote, disaster mode. I'm deeply concerned about where we will be in the early fall when respiratory illnesses and other demands on hospitals traditionally increase. We have seen the current disaster approaching for quite some time. Red alerts where no ambulances are available have exploded in Edmonton and area. We used to have a handful every month in 2019, adding up to a few minutes per month. But this year, there are hundreds every month, adding up to dozens of hours. One of the main causes of this is ambulances getting stuck at overwhelmed hospitals, unable to hand off their patients. Last year, for the first time, ambulances in St. Albert, Spruce Grove, Fort Saskatchewan, and Strathcona County spent more time responding to calls in Edmonton than in their own communities.
The United Conservative Party in Alberta will choose their new leader in October. Bridge City News is attempting to conduct exclusive 15-minute interviews with each of the 7 contenders running. To date, we've had the opportunity to speak one-on-one with Danielle Smith, Travis Taves, Rebecca Schultz, and Todd Loewen. In our chat with Mr. Loewen, he shared his thoughts on the Alberta Sovereignty Act.
The Sovereignty Act is basically saying no when Ottawa is infringing on our rights as Albertans. And so I agree that we need to be able to say no, but I would rather focus on working towards the things that we know we can do. We can look towards Quebec and see the things that they have already done, and we can work towards those things ourselves. Again, pension plan, employment insurance, collecting our own provincial taxes, provincial police force, all those things that we can do without having a constitutional crisis, without having a fight with Ottawa.
You can catch my full interview with Todd Lowen coming up in the second half of the show. Meanwhile, a third and final federal Conservative leadership debate took place in Ottawa Wednesday evening with Jean Charest, Roman Baber, and Scott Aitchison. Charest stressed that his experience as a political leader can bring unity, but would not say whether he plans to stay within the Conservative Party if he loses the race.
The fact of the matter is I'm focused on one single objective that I am going to meet, and that's becoming leader of the party and then Prime Minister of Canada, period.
Tory leadership candidate Roman Baber also talked to reporters about his thoughts on the importance of unity in the Conservative Party.
I believe that the Conservative Party is ready to form government. I believe that Canadians are tired of the Justin Trudeau Liberals and they're genuinely seeking for an alternative. And I believe that the only thing that can stand in our way of winning the next federal election is if our party is not united. And I'm going to go out of my way, whether I win the leadership or not, to do everything in my power to make sure that we remain united and committed to the Conservative Party.
Pierre Poilievre and Leslyn Lewis skipped the official event, risking a $50,000 fine. Speaking in Toronto, Defence Minister Anita Anand announced that Canada will join a British-led mission to train Ukrainian soldiers. The mission, called Operation Unifier, will see up to 225 Canadian Armed Forces personnel work in the United Kingdom to train new Ukrainian military recruits alongside counterparts from the UK, the Netherlands, and New Zealand.
Canada is committed to supporting Ukraine's short, medium, and long-term defense needs. I am therefore announcing today that we are fulfilling our promise to resume large-scale training under Operation Unifier. I have authorized the deployment of up to 225 Canadian Armed Forces personnel to the United Kingdom, where they will train new Ukrainian military recruits. Effective August 25th, the majority of our deployed Canadian Armed Forces will work as trainers, supported by a command and control element at a military base in southeast England. The first cohort of CAF personnel will depart from Edmonton, Alberta, starting next week.
Inflation continues to rise, affecting prices at the grocery store and at the gas pump, making life more expensive for all Canadians. At a news conference in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland shared the federal government's plan to address the rising cost of living.
For the Canadians who need it most, our government has an affordability plan to help directly with the rising cost of living. Our affordability plan includes an enhanced Canada Workers benefit that will put up to $2,400 more into the pockets of low-income families. We're cutting childcare fees by an average of 50% by the end of this year. There is a 10% increase in old age security for seniors 75 and over. That started last month. Dental care for Canadians with income under $90,000 per year, beginning with children under 12. And again, that's going to begin this year. A $500 payment to help people who rent and who are struggling with the cost of housing. Again, that's going to come this year. And then, of course, our main support programs, including the Canada Child Benefit, the GST credit, the Canada Pension Plan, old age security, and the GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, are indexed to inflation and will be increasing.
In other news, a judge has ruled that 5 people set to stand trial later this month will not be able to argue that Manitoba COVID-19 public health orders violated their charter rights. Jerry Boheimer, Sharon Vickner, Todd McDougall, Patrick Allard, and Church of God pastor Tobias Tisson were individually charged for alleged repeated violations of public health orders involving outdoor gatherings between November of 2020 and May of 2021. They filed notices of application arguing their arrests were in violation of their charter right to assembly. Provincial Court Judge Victoria Cornick says her ruling in no way affects their presumption of innocence when they stand trial on August 22nd. And on the lighter side, soaring melodies were playing at New West Theatre on Thursday morning. A new performance is set to rock Lethbridge fans. It's called Decades and features the rock and roll music that you will most likely have heard before from throughout the decades since the 50s. The total of 7 performers will take the stage, and this is the first summer performance for New West Theatre since 2019.
This show is called Decades, and it is a celebration of all things evocative of the decades we love, from the 50s until the 2000s. So you're going to see a big fashion parade of the decades, yes, as you see on us, as well as music. And we've got some impersonations that are coming in, and a lot of comedy and themed to the decades. So a big old party.
Decades will run at New West Theatre from August 10th to the 27th. It makes me just want to jump out of my seat and start dancing. Well, due to the hot weather Southern Alberta has been experiencing, Lethbridge County has issued a fire restriction. It came into effect at 9:30 this morning. Additional heat and dry, windy conditions are forecasted for the coming days, elevating the risk for fire spread. Winds today reached up to 70 kilometers per hour, and that should last into the evening. I'll have all those weather details coming up for you right after the break. Welcome back. These warm, dry conditions continuing to stick around, as well as the wind, which is creating a fire restriction here in Lethbridge County. So those winds will be gusting 50 to 70 kilometers per hour overnight into tomorrow. Not quite as gusty. We're looking at 20 to 40K winds. Also not as warm as it has been either. So we're looking at a high of 22 degrees on Friday. Lots of sunshine though. Mainly cloudy on Saturday with a bit of sun sticking out there. 25 degrees the high though, so it should still be a lovely day on Saturday. Up to 28 on Sunday, and then if you love the heat, you're gonna love what's in store for next week. We're looking at a high of 31 on Monday, and then up to 33 degrees for both Tuesday and Wednesday under sunny skies. So time to get your tan on if you haven't already. It's been a very warm summer. Average high for this time of year, 26. We're going to be well below that tomorrow, and then higher than that next week again. Average low 11 degrees. 35 was our high temperature on this day in 1939. And then in 2005, we had our chilliest, which was 4 degrees. 6:06 is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening, 9:09 p.m., giving us 15 hours and 3 minutes of daylight. So quite a bit more darkness over the night than we had yesterday. So those days are definitely getting shorter, and it's happening fast. On the West Coast, high of 24 tomorrow. In Victoria with lots of sunshine. Sunny skies also expected tomorrow in Vancouver, 22 the high there. 19 only in Edmonton and 18 in Calgary with a chance of showers. So we're going to see quite a bit cooler conditions in Alberta tomorrow. Same thing for parts of Saskatchewan, 19 the high tomorrow in Saskatoon. Looking at some conditions of rain there, 25 in Regina. Should be a lovely day there, sunny skies. Looking at chance of showers and a risk of some thunderstorms, and a high of 28 in Winnipeg tomorrow. 29 the high though in Toronto with a mix of sun and cloud, up to 28 degrees expected in Ottawa tomorrow, and 27 in Montreal. And the humidex, of course, creating high humid conditions in central Canada. On the East Coast, looking at a high of 30 degrees with high humidity, building into the possibility of some thunderstorms in Fredericton tomorrow. Halifax looking at a high of 30 as well, 28 in Charlottetown, and up to a beautiful 30 degrees tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland under sunny skies. So there you have it. That is your forecast. In May, it was reported that 9 million Canadian consumers are credit invisible, meaning they have either no credit score or an inadequate credit score to receive a loan from a bank. And as the Bank of Canada continues to hike interest rates, more Canadians will be unable to afford or get approved for a loan. As a result, more people are borrowing money from friends and family. In the U.S., 25.6 million people, or more than 10% of U.S. adults, had to rely on their support network for financial backing, up from 19.1 million a year. Two federal cabinet ministers faced questions from Conservative MPs today about Canada's decision to return 6 turbines to Germany. The turbines belong to Russian state-owned energy giant Gazprom and are part of a natural gas pipeline that supplies Germany with fuel. MPs on the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee questioned Energy Minister Jonathan Wilkinson and Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly about whether the exemption weakens the global sanctions regime. Wilkinson defended the decision, saying it effectively called Russian President Vladimir Putin's bluff. Well, it's still too early to tell, but researchers are looking at whether rice could soon become a crop in southern Alberta. An irrigated crop scientist out of the University of Lethbridge, along with Galaxy Ag Ventures, are looking at ways to potentially add rice as a crop to this region, as it's been known to grow in other parts of the country.
Galaxy Ag Ventures is very interested in exploring rice production here because they have markets for rice byproducts. So sort of the value-added ingredients from rice production, like starch, oil, protein that can be extracted from rice that is inherently gluten-free. So I think the company has an idea, like a big picture idea of where they want to go with this. And obviously they could import rice to use for this purpose, but if they can grow it here, they reduce transportation costs and they contribute to our agricultural economy in a different way.
A pilot project is currently taking place out in the field, which will be wrapping up at the end of the year. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 31 points on the day to finish at 19,577. The Dow was down 85 points to 32,726. The S&P 500 was down 3 points to 4151, and the Nasdaq was up 52 points to 12,720. West Texas Intermediate oil was down $2.87 to $87.79 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 13 cents to $8.14 US. Gold was down 15 cents to $17.91.13 US per ounce, and silver was even at $20.18 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $10.89 per bushel. Barley is at $8.06. Canola is at $18.87, and corn is at $10.54 per bushel. Live cattle were down 20 cents to $137.70. Feeder cattle were down 28 cents to $179.08. Lean hogs were down 35 cents to $120.65, all August contracts. And the Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 77.73 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, the Supreme Court of Canada will not hear an appeal in a high-profile Alberta case that saw a couple tried twice in the death of their sick toddler. David and Colette Stephan were accused of not seeking medical attention sooner for their 18-month-old son before he died in 2012. They testified that they were treating the boy with natural remedies for what they thought was croup. The Stephans applied to the Supreme Court to have laws changed to protect parents' choice of care and choice of vaccination for their children, but the court turned them down. Up next, the United Conservative Party in Alberta will choose their new leader in October. Bridge City News sat down with one of the candidates to get his perspective on the Alberta Sovereignty Act, healthcare in our province, and Alberta oil. That is right after this short break. And if you see news happening in your community, please be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We would love to hear from you.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. This summer, the Lethbridge Shakespeare Performance Society returns to the outdoor theater with Shakespeare in the Park. This year, they present one of William Shakespeare's most famous plays, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. More than just a play about revenge, Hamlet deals with questions about life, love, death, and betrayal. Come for an evening of dramatic entertainment every Thursday in August at Galt Gardens beginning at 7:30 p.m. Discover homegrown produce and homemade products at the Downtown Farmers Market at Festival Square in Lethbridge. Every Wednesday beginning at 9 a.m. until September 4th, you'll find over 15 local vendors selling fresh fruit and vegetables, delicious baked goods, homemade soaps, and so much more. Enjoy the relaxing atmosphere and support local producers and artisans at the same time. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Alberta's United Conservative Party leadership race has 7 confirmed candidates running and will be choosing its new leader to replace Jason Kenney on October the 6th. Now, one of those candidates vying for the premier seat is Todd Lowen, an MLA from Northern Alberta. Welcome to Bridge City News, Todd. So great to have you on today.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Great. Okay, so tell us a bit about yourself and what it is that what fired you up to join this race to become the new leader of the UCP and the Premier of Alberta? It's a big job.
Yes, it is a big job, but I've been looking forward to this opportunity to get into this leadership race. I'd never envisioned myself as running for Premier in the past. But what we've seen in the last few years, I think, has left Albertans wanting a new direction. And I feel that there's a lot of Albertans that haven't been heard. And I feel that I can represent a lot of Albertans that have had those feelings. And it's an opportunity to get things back on track in Alberta. And I think Albertans are looking for something. And we have a good group of candidates that are running for leadership right now. And I believe that we'll be able to give those options to people to choose from. And again, looking forward to this leadership race, looking forward to being selected as the Premier of Alberta at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the UCP seems to be a very divided party. So what will it take to make the Conservatives united once again?
Well, I think we're already on track for that right now. We've had a divisive leader in the past, and he's leaving his post, and that's why we have the leadership race going on right now. So I think a lot of that has already started to come together. I believe that as we travel Alberta, engage Albertans, that will give us a chance for Albertans to feel like they've had been listened to and had a voice. When we look forward to the leadership race here, and I think there's an opportunity to bring Albertans together, and I think that we can bring this party back together and be able to represent Alberta going forward and into the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Todd, a big part of your campaign is obviously to put Alberta first, right? So, and I believe that certainly resonates with rural Albertans, especially now that the federal government says it wants to basically force farmers to reduce fertilizer use in order to meet its climate targets. So what's wrong with that approach? Would you approach that differently, and how would you respond to the Prime Minister about this as Premier?
Well, we have a real problem here in Canada. I think when we look at our dealings with Ottawa and Confederation, it's a broken system. We see Ottawa trying to interfere in the jurisdiction of Alberta and trying to push things on Albertans that Albertans just are not interested. And that's across the province. The latest, of course, is the fertilizer issue with the 30% reduction. We see the carbon tax. We see things where they've interfered with the tech mines and with property rights too. There's a lot of issues with our deal with Ottawa, and we've been really good at writing strongly worded letters that the Prime Minister has been able to crumple up and throw in the garbage, but we need to actually do something now. I think we need to start taking action immediately, and we've been kicking the can down the road. We've been having panels travel Alberta. We've been having reports drawn up, but we haven't been doing anything. And I think we need to start, and I will, as Premier, start immediately working towards some of the things that Albertans would like to see, which one of them would be our own pension plan that would save Albertans $3 to $4 billion a year, and our own Alberta Constitution.
Wow. Okay. So with that said, do you agree with the proposed Alberta Sovereignty Act?
The Sovereignty Act is basically saying no when Ottawa is infringing on our rights as Albertans. And so I agree that we need to be able to say no, but I would rather focus on working towards the things that we know we can do. We can look towards Quebec and see the things that they have already done, and we can work towards those things ourselves. Again, pension plan, employment insurance, collecting our own provincial taxes, provincial police force, all those things that we can do without having a constitutional crisis, without having a fight with Ottawa. But having those things would give us an opportunity to show Ottawa that we mean business and that we can then be in a position of strength rather than weakness when we deal with them.
Okay, so as Premier, what's your opinion? Would MLAs be free to speak their mind, or should they maybe keep opposing opinions to themselves? How do you see it?
Well, MLAs are elected by their constituents to represent them, and I feel that they should be able to do that freely and openly, because that's how democracy works. In the past, we've seen that suppressed, and I stuck up for my constituents. I represented my constituents when I wrote a letter to Jason Kenney over a year ago, and that's what I would bring forward. And I would be doing the same thing as Premier of Alberta as far as representing Albertans in that same way, as strong and as forward as possible.
Okay, now one of the biggest dividers in our province is how the COVID pandemic was and is being handled. And there are many different opinions on this, of course. So where do you stand on this? Would you impose lockdowns or vaccine mandates if another wave were to hit us?
No, I've opposed the vaccine mandates and the vaccine passports and things like that right from the start. It's proven that it hasn't worked, and we've also seen that the government's had to backtrack on all those things anyways. Albertans have a right to choose those things, and I think the handling of the pandemic was a serious issue that this government faced. And I understand that there were some tough decisions, and those were tough decisions. But again, over and over again, we've seen flip-flops. We've seen direction that wasn't that Albertans wouldn't agree with, and so we needed to work better on that and do better with that. But of course, when I look back to this government's term, the Albertans were losing faith in this government long before COVID even hit, and so that's the issue. A lot of it had to do with our dealings with Ottawa. So as much as COVID is an issue, there's other big issues that are going on in Alberta that have caused Albertans to lose trust in this government.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I understand that you would enact legislation to prevent compelled disclosure of vaccine status to third parties.
Yes, absolutely. Nobody should have to disclose their private health information to anybody. When we go into a business, I don't know where we got to the point where we would have to disclose our personal health information to private individuals in a private business. And I think it puts those businesses in a bad situation too, where they're there to collect information that's private and shouldn't be disseminated in any way. So again, we shouldn't be in that position at all. And again, putting those businesses in that position, I think, is a very very dangerous place.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Of course, affordability is one of your key campaign issues, and with soaring inflation continuing, I mean, we're all feeling it right now at the grocery store, at the gas tank, you name it. So what would you do to make life more affordable for Albertans?
Well, I think one thing we can do is we can be reducing personal income taxes for the middle class, and I would like to see a reduction in the small business tax too, going from 2% down to 0. So our small businesses have really suffered. The individuals that have, some of them just themselves as an employee, or maybe a dozen employees, they've suffered a lot through the last 2 years, and I believe they need a break. But when we look at all the other issues that we have going on in Alberta, we have enormous debt. We have $112 billion of debt, and paying $2.7 billion a year in interest. And as interest rates rise, we'll have more and more issues with that. And those are things that take away the money that can be used to pay for the services that we need, that Albertans expect.
Okay, now Todd, the Alberta oil and gas industry often gets labeled as a dirty oil villain, and it seems to be targeted again and again by federal regulations designed to create that uphill battle for the energy sector. So is this something that you would like to see changed?
Yeah, obviously we have the cleanest and most efficient. We have good safety records. We have good human rights records, obviously, in Alberta and Canada. And our oil and gas should be used throughout the world to displace some of the oil, the true dirty oil, and the oil that from dictatorships and countries that don't have good human rights records. When we look at what's happening in Europe right now, and we see Europe held hostage by some of these countries that we could be shipping oil to replace some of that. We see that there's a lot of issues there. We need to be able to have access to the markets, and we've been restricted by some of the federal government regulations, and that needs to stop. We live in this country together. we need to have access to those markets. It seems like the Eastern Canada sure would like to have the revenue from our oil and gas sector, but they're not interested in seeing pipelines come across. But we need to be able to push back on that and make that happen. Again, we need to have a stronger position in Confederation than we have right now, and we need to start taking action on that immediately.
So what can be done to change this and maybe even bring jobs back to our province?
Well, again, I think we need to have a stronger negotiating position with Ottawa when it comes to some of that pushback. Again, we have international pressures too, and I understand that too. But again, when we look at the other jurisdictions that are producing oil, we do have a very clean, environmentally clean oil, and we have the standards here that are second to none, and we're getting better all the time too. It's not like we're standing back on our laurels and just puffing up our chests and talking about how good we are. We continue to do better all the time, and that's something I think that should be recognized around the world. And we haven't probably done as good a job as we could as far as making that known, but we need to work towards that. And again, we need to hold the federal government to account when they start restricting our opportunity for our province to get our products to market.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about healthcare for a moment. Lots to talk about here. So we all know about the doctor shortage in Alberta. My own doctor is leaving the province. So what needs to change to increase physician availability?
Well, we see that especially in rural Alberta, but I'm sure it's a concern sometimes in the cities too, as far as the shortage of doctors. Rural Alberta, we see emergency rooms closing down all the time. And this has been an ongoing problem, but I think it's actually gotten worse. And what I would like to see is we have a post-secondary education system here in Alberta that I don't believe is graduating as many people as we need to serve our needs as a society, because we end up actually importing doctors from all over the world. And don't get me wrong, myself, I don't know if I've ever had an Alberta educated doctor as a family doctor. So we love our doctors that have come out from outside the country. They're doing a great job for us. But again, we have a post-secondary education system that's subsidized heavily by the Alberta taxpayer, and it's not providing the educated people that we need. And I think that's a serious problem. Another problem we have is when our students can't get into our colleges and universities here in Alberta, they sometimes either choose not to go into that field, or they go elsewhere in the world to get their education. And then the process to come back is convoluted, time consuming, and restricts their opportunity to get back to Alberta and actually come back to work and serve Albertans. So a lot of them end up going elsewhere in the world again. And so there's several issues there, but I believe we can fix this problem. We have plenty of intelligent people here in Alberta that could provide our healthcare needs. We just have to allow them the opportunity to do it.
Okay, what about decreasing wait times and increasing hospital bed capacity?
Yeah, for sure. When we look at the system that we have right now, where we're spending compared to other jurisdictions near the top of the pack, and what we're getting for services is at near the bottom of the pack. We have to clean up the inefficiencies in the system. It isn't about how much money we spend, it's how we spend the money that we are spending. And there's no excuse to be waiting 2-3 years for hip and knee surgeries, waiting months and months for an MRI, and waiting hours for ambulances. We're spending money and we're not getting the services that we need. I see that we need a severe overhaul of the AHS. That's a system that we brought ourselves to a centralized system when we previously had the regional system, and I think that's proven to been a failure, because we haven't seen an improvement in services, we haven't seen a reduction in costs. So we need to go back, I believe, to a regional decision-making process and have that overhaul of AHS, so that we can start getting what we deserve as far as results for the money we pay.
Okay, and Todd, why should UCP members vote for you? What makes you different or stand out from the other candidates?
Well, myself, I consider myself just a regular guy. I'm not a smooth-talking politician. I'm just here to serve Albertans, and I've stood up for my constituents in the past, and I paid a price for that when I asked Jason Kenney to resign and I was removed from caucus. And I plan to take that same strength and that same intestinal fortitude to represent Albertans and do that. So I believe I have something to offer to Albertans. And again, it's when we look at this process, members of the party will make a decision. October 6th, we will have a new premier, and I hope Albertans and party members will choose me.
And I'm just curious with the latest polls coming out showing that Danielle Smith, Travis Taves, and Brian Jean sort of in the lead right now. If anything ever like kind of push came to shove, would you consider dropping out and putting your support behind any of those candidates, or are you going to stay in this till the end?
No, I plan to stay in here right to the end. I think there's the polls are always interesting, of course, especially when polling is done outside of the membership, and only the membership of the party will be able to vote. So I think those polls it may be a little deceiving off the top, and I think I'm doing fairly well as far as the campaign is concerned. And again, we have a long ways to go and lots of work to do, but I'm looking forward to it. And I've been traveling across Alberta. I think since the campaign started, I put about 25,000 kilometers on my truck, and I'll continue doing that and covering the ground across Alberta from one end to the other.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today, Todd. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Todd Loewen is a candidate in the UCP leadership race. The party will be choosing its new leader on October the 6th. Well, I think all of us have some stories we could share about conflicts we have experienced at work. Sometimes we even dread going to work because of the stress that we know that's waiting there for us. Joining us today to learn how to better deal with this is Dr. Paul White. He's a psychologist, a consultant, and co-authors of a new book. Actually, not such a new book, but Making Things Right at Work, which is available at appreciationatwork.com. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. White. This book sounds like such a success. We were talking a little bit offline there, and it's such an interesting topic. So conflict in the workplace, this is an area you specialize in. In fact, it's, in my opinion, one of the most asked questions in job interviews. So how do you deal with conflict in the workplace?
Well, there's a lot of different things you can do because there's different kinds of conflict. And in fact, some people don't connect with the word conflict as much as tension or friction, that they sort of don't feel like, well, I'm not in a fight. But a lot of it has to do with some very simple kinds of things like miscommunication between people that, I thought you were going to call that client yesterday and you thought I was, and we come today and we realize nobody did, and, have to deal with that. Or different expectations about situations, about whether, you pulled off an event and one person thinks it went pretty well, and then another person thinks that, boy, we left a lot that still could be done better. And so it's there. We're people, we make mistakes, we don't communicate real well. And so really, I've found that it's more important for business leaders to not focus so much on avoiding conflict, but building tools on how to deal with it once it's there.
Now, we were chatting, you co-authored this book with, is it Gary Chapman? He's the author of The 5 Love Languages. So maybe talk about how that came to be.
Yeah, so I consult with family-owned businesses and deal with the relational issues there. And in doing so, found that family members, I had one father said, I think the plan for succession is going well. And the son said, it's a disaster. I can't ever please my dad. And there was a gap there. And so, I thought, well, maybe the 5 love languages could apply to work. So I approached Dr. Chapman, and 10 years ago, we wrote that book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And it's been used by lots of companies, and we have an online assessment that goes with it. And then over time, we've written on toxic workplaces, and then this one on, sort of the practical ways to help deal with conflict at work.
It's such a meaty topic, and one that unfortunately doesn't seem to go away, does it? So businesses actually hire you to come and teach their leaders and staff how to resolve conflict in the workplace. But you obviously can't be everywhere at the same time. So can reading this book potentially change an entire work environment?
Well, I think the key word is potentially. Just reading the book probably won't, but reading it and then applying some of the concepts clearly can. And that's one of the cool things that we've been able to help organizations. A few weeks ago, we had a feature article written on our work in the New York Times in the Suddenly Business section. And so it works. And some of it is just real practical kinds of things, like be direct in your communication versus indirect, in the sense that you tell people what you think, in a kind way, but don't try to go around people or don't tell somebody else to send a message or don't gossip, because that just sort of creates an untrusting kind of environment. And the other thing is to lots of times when we have a tense situation, we react real quick and sort of shoot our mouth off or get too angry. And another practical thing is just to slow down, just take a breath, sort of wait, maybe ask a question of clarifying and say, I'm sort of confused. I thought we were doing this, but I'm hearing this now. So can you explain that to me? And just really sort of basic listening, active listening skills, communication skills can really help keep things from getting out of control.
It could potentially avoid that blow up, right? Because many of us probably tend to express anger in different forms when we run into that conflict with that coworker, so that's good advice there. Stop and reassess, take a breath, and maybe just ask them for clarification. Great advice. So a lot of employees say that they don't feel appreciated of their hard work. So how can managers and coworkers learn how to show appreciation more effectively?
Yeah, and that's really the key to the 5 languages of appreciation. One is that a lot of people confuse appreciation and employee recognition, which can be a good thing if it's done right, but recognition is largely about performance. We believe appreciation includes that, but it's about the person, because we're not just work units, right? We're not just sort of production units, but we're people. We have lives and we have characteristics that are valuable beyond production. I like to work with cheerful people more than grumpy people. And so, I can call attention to that to a team member who's got a nice smile and a great laugh. And the other part is that when people hear the word appreciation, they think mainly about words, saying thanks or giving a compliment. But our research, and we've had over 350,000 people take our online assessment, finds that, people want to be appreciated in different ways. There's words, there's quality time, which could be individual time or it could be hanging out with your colleagues and friends. An act of service can be when you're working on a really tough project, time limited, what somebody can do to help you get through that. Tangible gifts is another language. It's not bonuses and raises, but it's just small things that show that you're getting to know your colleague. So like their favorite cup of coffee, or maybe a magazine. If they're going to plant a garden, you say, hey, you're going to do that. I thought you might enjoy this. And then even physical touch. And physical touch is the one that people, we're going to get sued.
Especially in the workplace, right?
Well, yeah. But what we found is physical touch is just spontaneous celebration, right? It's a high five when you finish a project. It's a fist bump when you solve a problem, and can be a congratulatory handshake. But it's interesting that over half of the employees that we've assessed want a different language than words. Words is sort of the big one. It's still about 45% of the employees, but if you only use words, you're going to miss the mark. And so we've created an assessment as well as a book and then some training materials to help leaders and colleagues communicate it, because it's not just top down from leaders, it includes colleagues as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you really are going through those 5 love languages, like what a couple would do with the acts of service and the words of affirmation and stuff. So really, those can almost be applied to almost any relationship in our lives then, can't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. And they look different at work than they do in personal relationships with friends and family. And that's why with our assessment, and people that maybe know what their personal love language is, actually their language of appreciation may be different because of the setting and context. And in our assessment, we identify the specific actions that a person wants, because quality time is a really important one. In the old days, those are older, it meant time with your supervisor or manager. But more and more for younger workers, they want to hang out with their friends and colleagues, go out to lunch, go out afterwards. And so you could get the right language, but miss the action and still sort of miss the target.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, how often do we make assumptions about others at work or about a particular situation? And why does this tend to cause problems?
Well, unfortunately, it seems like we do a lot. And the assumption is about their motivation of why they did something versus sort of giving them the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, we sort of attribute negative motivations that maybe a person's criticizing the event that we helped, lead, and you say to yourself at least, they're trying to throw me under the bus and make me look bad. When in actuality, they may just want to make it better next time. And, it's hard enough. We usually have mixed motives ourselves. Our motives usually aren't totally pure. And so it's hard enough to figure out our own motivation, let alone somebody else's. And so we really encourage people to give sort of the benefit of the doubt, ask questions, figure out what's up, and don't overreact for sure.
That's a really good point. I could see how those assumptions could happen, especially in a work environment where there may be competition, right? Those competitive environments, I could see how that could completely happen.
One of the key sort of concepts that we believe is that, employees are people, and the way that we get along better often is to get to know the person, because usually there's some touchstones and touch points where we can identify and understand them better, so that we're not just totally guessing and coming from our own perspective solely.
Yeah, great advice. How about communication? What kinds of miscommunication can cause conflict, and how can we improve on this?
It's interesting. As a psychologist, I used to teach master's level counselors. It's the same skills we teach counselors, and it's what's called active listening. And it's that simple thing of when you hear somebody say something, before you respond, especially if it's sort of a large amount of information, it's good to summarize and say, okay, so you're saying, that from your perspective, the event went okay. There's some things that we can improve, and maybe plan ahead more or whatever. And so then they have the opportunity to clarify, because lots of times we assume we hear correctly, that we've heard everything, and also those of us that are speaking don't always communicate our thoughts clearly. We may say it a little different than what we're thinking, and so just having that pause to say, is this what you're saying? And then move
kind
forward.
of fill in the gaps there.
Exactly. It can really smooth a lot of things out.
Okay, so you write that good character and integrity is crucial for a healthy workplace. So what do you mean by this, and why is it so important?
Well, we found that to build trust in relationships, there's really three important things, and there's C's. One is competence. If you're going to trust somebody in the workplace, you got to believe that they're going to be able to do the task. Secondly, consistency, that they're going to show up, or they're going to do it, get it done on time, maybe in the right quality level. And then character. And in this sense, we're talking about character of integrity, of following through on what you agreed to. But really, trust is also built that you believe that the other person's looking out for your interests as well as their own, so that they're not just using this to manipulate it so that they look good and you look bad. And so we find that it's really important to demonstrate that you say what you mean, and that as you work together on a team, you consider other people's interests and perspectives too, because we almost always think that our way is right. But it's not always the only right way or the only piece that we need to consider.
Here's a big one. So when we mess up at work,
that never happens.
It never happens. Everybody at one point in time has messed up at work. So how do we deal with that? It can sometimes be challenging to own up to it. So should we apologize for anything and everything that goes wrong, or how do we know what warrants an apology exactly?
Yeah, I think, no, we shouldn't apologize for anything and everything. And some people do, and it sort of gets in the way, right? But I think when we've done something or not done something that created some negative event or consequence, either to the organization or to some of our teammates, I think it's reasonable to consider apologizing. And the first thing is just to accept responsibility and say, I didn't do that the way I should have. Sorry about that. And part of that is, sort of being sorry for the negative consequences. You don't have to take full responsibility for everything, because that's usually not the case. But you say, man, I'm sorry that I was late in getting this, and I see how it created some stress for you. And just starting there, and our colleague, Dr. Jennifer Thomas and Dr. Chapman have written a book, The 5 Languages of Apology. And there's a fuller way to apologize. But if you at least start with those, accept responsibility and sort of say, I'm sorry for the negative results that happened, it's a good good way to get going.
Wow, saying I'm sorry, it's a whole chapter, a whole book on itself. Who knew? Who knew there were so many ways to apologize? So what about rebuilding relationships with people that we have had conflict with at work numerous times? Maybe how do we put it behind us and move forward? It creates really awkward situations sometimes.
It does. And I think the apologizing fits in there, or at least calling attention to the tension and say, I know we've had our differences over the past, and, that's what it was. And I know that's there. But I really do want to work together with you, and you try to move forward. If you just sort of blow through it and don't acknowledge the tension or whatever, it feels really weird. And that's where building trust is. And we have a couple of chapters on that, as far as most of us, when we think about trust or building a relationship, we think about it globally. Like, I don't trust, Bob, or I don't trust Rebecca, but it's really situation specific. It's like, I'm not sure Bob can handle that project solely by himself, or I'm not sure that Rebecca, has the skills to really handle this large client. And so what that does is it allows us to specify the situation and then look at those 3 C's of competence, consistency, and character, and build a plan to help rebuild that. Whether that's you having a hard time trusting the other person, or maybe another person having a hard time trusting you, and say, where do I need to grow in this? And specify that and work on it together.
Okay. Any advice on how to deal with a boss who tends to be critical or unappreciative or unrealistic expectations?
Yeah, I did research on toxic workplaces and literally toxic leaders, and it's called Rising Above a Toxic Workplace. And, there's a difference between sort of a difficult boss or somebody that you're, just different from, and a toxic leader. A toxic leader really is somebody who is all about themselves, and everything is for them. They use people, they withhold information, they distort information. You probably want to get away from those kind of people, the really toxic ones. The tougher ones, I find a helpful strategy is to have somebody that you can use as a sounding board, because we get in our own head and our own history and emotions, and we maybe aren't interpreting things right, and say, when he said this in the meeting, it really hurt me, or it agitated me. How did you hear that? And get some input from people that you trust their judgment. And that helps us be able to sort of maintain a reality base. That's part of the problem of COVID and remote working. When we get by ourselves for a long time, we get weird because we don't interpret things correctly. And so we need feedback from others.
All right. Well, it looks like we are out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. White. Appreciate having you on.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Dr. Paul White is one of the authors of the new book, Making Things Right at Work, which is available at appreciationnetwork.com. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.